passionate, thought-provoking, provocative, and emotional. Fairness and truth. Fairness. Provocative. Straight-talking. Fairness. Provocative. Straight-talking.
Welcome to The Pledge, the programme committed to honest, straight-talking debate and telling it like it is. Today, Graham's taking on Donald Trump. Michelle will tell us why America's got it right on success. Nick wants rape laws changed. And Rachel says, beware of the grief junkies. But first, it's me. And I want to start with an uncomfortable truth, because somewhere along the line it became OK to equate Jews and Israelis with the actions of Hitler, especially in this country at the moment on the left. Bradford MP Naz Shah has been suspended from the Labour Party for social media posts in 2014 saying Israel should relocate to the US and that the transportation would save them some pocket money. The issue isn't whether Jeremy Corbyn should have suspended her earlier, though. It's how an educated woman, someone who at the time was working to enter our parliament, could believe these things and think it's OK to glibly share them. And Naz Shah is not alone. She's the 6th Labour member suspended or excluded for anti-Semitism in the past 8 weeks. Vicky Kirby, another Labour activist, thought it was OK to tweet this. What do you know about Jews? They've got big noses and support Spurs. Lol. In a way, I'm glad these views are being outed and aired in the cold light of day. But Labour suspending Naz Shah or Vicky Kirby does nothing to cure the real problem, that of a deeply rooted prejudice about Jews, which is making yet another comeback. But the question really is, what on earth is going to be done about anti-Semitism? And why is it making a comeback at all?
Well, I agree with you, because if she's saying this in public, God only knows what that woman is thinking in private. That really is frightening. And that a British MP, albeit that she wasn't at the time, but a British MP months before can talk about transportation, use the word solution involving people from Israel, the bulk of whom are obviously going to be Jews, is absolutely horrific. My concern with what you say is it's almost as if it's just arrived. I fear that it has been woven into some aspects of British life for too long, and we should actually... The only thing to celebrate out of this is that we can actually see how big the problem is. Labour has a massive problem. It's probably not actually restricted to Labour. There are probably plenty of anti-Semites in all the other parties, all of them. But Labour's got a massive problem, I agree with you. But how would you legislate against it? What would you do? This is a concern. Because I think you'll find everybody around this table says, absolutely wrong, won't put up with it. How do we stop it?
Well, I mean, that's why I wanted to raise this today, because, you know, first of all, I should say, as a Jewish person, I'm embarrassed to talk about this. You know, Jewish people don't want to be victims. They don't want to have to say, oh, you know, and actually Jewish humour is the way to deal with it a lot of the time. We've got pretty bleak humour if you look at the history of what's happened to the people. You know, we always wear our hats because we've always got to move, whatever you want to say. You know, that's a good one from Fiddler on the Roof. But quite seriously, I raise this because dinner party anti-Semitism is also a massive problem.
Have you been a
country.
victim of anti-Semitism?
I have had people say to me things that they shouldn't have said. I've had people make jokes about how tight people are with money who are Jewish. I've had people say things about Israel to me as if I am responsible for the actions of Netanyahu. In a very bad moment, I've had somebody say to me, Jews think differently, don't they?
But is that part of the misunderstanding of ignorance of people, whereby, and I'm talking lots of different people, in the sense that to be anti-Israel or anti-Israeli foreign policy then allows people to jump to the conclusion that you're being anti-Semitic. And they're two very separate things, and certainly I'm not excusing the ignorance of somebody in public office would have towards stereotyping a group of people.
But what you've just done is what usually happens with these debates. You've done the classic, what about people who want to be critical of Israel who then get accused of being anti-Semitic? I'm not saying that.
No.
What I'm saying is the modern definition, the definition of modern anti-Semitism is where either Jews around the world are blamed for Israeli actions or Israelis are compared, those in government and in the country, to Hitler. That is actually the modern definition. It's accepted by the UN. It's what it is. But what always happens in these debates, and that's why I'd really like to move away from this, is people saying, and first of all, you also said foreign policy there. I think most people are critical of Israel's domestic policy. But I think what always happens in these debates is I have to make people feel comfortable in my presence criticising Israel. You know what? Criticise Israel all you want. What I'm actually saying, and what I want to know from people who've been in this country, Rachel, maybe you've got something to say about this. You know, you've got, obviously, I'm sure, some interesting dinner parties that happen in your house. You know, why is it still a thing? You know, why is it here? Yes, it may have a modern face, but there's still some classic tropes going around, and that seem to be banter.
It was interesting in your introductory comments, you suggested that there's not just institutional racism in the Labour Party, but it's sort of baked into our national culture. I think that's a bit strong. I've lived and worked in Israel myself. People often assume I'm Jewish because I'm called Rachel and I've got a big nose. But
There's another classic, yeah.
No, it's true.
Well,
no,
I'm a Jew in disguise because I don't look like
according to Naz Shah. Naz Shah, in
Yeah.
a sense, answered Graham's point, which is being anti-Israel being anti-Semitic? She admitted in her own apology that it is, because Israel is the only country of Jews.
Well, respectfully, her initial apology was, I regret the words.
Yeah.
So let's be...
She also has...
you don't regret the sentiment, love, you regret the words.
She accused herself of anti-Semitism, having criticised this retweet of a image which showed Israel being transported to the middle of America. She's answered her own question.
Can I just break in there, though? It went worse. The reason why it went worse, it wasn't just criticism of Israel.
She said Israel was acting like Hitler.
Exactly.
She did indeed. And what you say, what can we do about this? The Labour Party has a problem. There's been too many instances of open anti-Semitism in the Labour Party to say it's got anything but a problem, and Labour is a cold house for Jewish people now. They have tried to do this. The problem was Corbyn forgave her, accepted her apology, and then he suspended her, which shows the party is in a muddle and they are guilty, possibly, of what you suggest, which is institutional racism.
But taking it away from Labour just for a moment, because I understand what you're saying, maybe it's strong. I don't walk down the street and feel scared. I mean, I actually know that Islamophobia is a much bigger issue in a way in this country at the moment, and plus, you know, Jewish people do have the advantage, and certainly as a Jewish woman, I don't wear a hijab, I don't wear a headscarf, I don't wear anything that identifies me necessarily beyond some of the sort of racial stereotyping of how large one's nose should be or might be. But I'm interested to understand, because people who are part of a political party are just our population. You know, they're not a sort of separate species. So I don't know if, Michelle, you've had any experience or you have any views on how we could solve this issue.
Well, I don't think that there's a place for any kind of racism for anyone to hold those views that have got any role in public office. So for me, it's very clear, if you have those views and you're seen to have those views, you should be out straight away. There shouldn't be investigations and suspensions, then coming back in and going back out. To me, if you hold those views, you shouldn't be representing...
In public or in private? As Nick said, think what people are saying around the dinner tables of...
But then, if you're in a public office and you feel like that against any group, I don't think you should be representing the public. But what I was interested in, this is perhaps my naivety, when you did your intro, you said that you feel like it's making a comeback. So would that indicate to you, do you actually think that it was diminishing and it had pretty much gone? Or do you think that is what's happening now, less that it's making a comeback, is it that it never went away, but actually what's happening now is we've got so many more channels of communication. Social media is so big now that anyone's views are getting much more of an airing than they perhaps used to.
So, I mean, I think that's interesting in itself, because Simon Sharma, the historian, let me just get this right, said it used to be a Zionist problem, now it's the Jews. So if you had a bit of an issue, it was hidden behind, and maybe it's, as you say, with technology, we can sort of see what people think more. But also the Justice Secretary, Michael Gove, did a speech on this recently where he said, modern anti-Semitism finds a home in too many people's hearts. And also, I thought that was a very interesting point. Just before I come to you, Nick, you wanted to say something on that?
I just was going to say that it's cloaked. When Michelle said it was cloaked, and it's not as cloaked as it was now. But I do agree with what Graham said. And look, I'm very proud to say I'm a trustee of CST, which is the big Jewish security group that's funded by Gerald Bronson. Community was funded by Gerald Bronson, and I'm very honoured and pleased and proud to do charity work for that. But Graham is right. When there are incidents in the Gaza, the number of anti-Semitic incidents, the number of daubings, the number of attacks on bar mitzvahs and schools and Jewish old people does soar. These people are so Neanderthal, they cannot see the distinction. So I know you jumped at Graham a little bit, but the essence of what he was saying is true. That publicity fuels the anti-Semitism.
And it's the fact that actually... what is the root of this sentiment within the Labour Party? And when you go back to years, you think about some sympathies with the Palestinian cause, which is fundamental to some Labour Party activists, Labour Party members. Now, absolutely, jumping from that, which I think is opinions that should be aired if people have genuine concerns about that, but jumping from that to then using the sort of language that is discriminatory and prejudice is offensive. In football, if a football player or someone linked to football uses that sort of language, they will get banned, a ban of minimum of 5 games and mandatory education for using discriminatory language. So football is way ahead of politics.
This kind of language also completely banned in Germany as well. So I agree with it should be banned from public life. It has absolutely no presence here.
Well, I hope it goes out of private life.
I'll tell you what, I've learned something. Football players are educated.
I'm going to really get you now. I'm going from...
How dare you?
I'm going from synagogue to demagogue.
Okay.
Took me all day to work
on
that thing. Anyway, what do these two people have in common? Yeah. That's obviously a tricky one, I admit. The answer is that they both absolutely terrify me for very different reasons. Thierry Henry's speed, skill and agility used to keep me awake at night. And so does the prospect of President Trump. As far as he's concerned, the race for the nomination is over. After winning 5 more states, he claims he's now certain to become the Republican candidate for president. Last night, he even made a big speech on foreign policy. And in fact, he tried to sound like a statesman.
The world must know that we do not go abroad in search of enemies, that we are always happy when old enemies become friends and when old friends become allies.
But don't be fooled. This was him just a few days ago talking about his rival candidate.
He has a news conference all the time when he's eating. I have never seen a human being eat in such a disgusting fashion. This guy takes a pancake and he's shoving it in his mouth. It's disgusting. Do you want that for your president? I don't think so.
Trump has got this far by generating controversy and whipping up a frenzy of support along the way. But that's exactly what worries me. The politics of polarisation, of them and us, is becoming acceptable. And Trump is not just controversial, he's dangerous.
What is this fascination with the way that people eat, by the way? Because wasn't we doing it all with, was it Ed Miliband and a bacon sandwich hanging out of his mouth or
it's all to do with etiquette.
Yeah, I saw way too much of that.
But... Etiquette.
Yeah, like what you did. But so joking aside, I know what you're saying. I don't think that Trump will be the president. I do think he'll be the nominee. And I think that that is because people are voting for him because they want to. And that is, you know, it's democracy, it's doing what it wants. This is who they want to vote for, they're doing it. I think the reason that they're voting for him, I almost see it as like a middle finger vote, if you like. I think that people are so fed up in lots of cases with what they deem as the political elite. They've got this guy at the Tangerine Tornado, I heard him refer to the other day, which made me laugh. But there's this guy who, in lots of cases, he sounds like them. He's using the language that they're using. He's having the kind of conversations that they're having with their friends at home. And people are relating to that. And I think that there's a lot that some politicians can learn from the fact that people do want somebody standing in front of them that's going to be able to relate to them. And I think that's what his kind of surge and his popularity is coming from. I don't think he'll be president because I don't think there's any kind of substance between any of the ludicrous statements that he makes. Yeah, not only is he getting this far, he's progressing further and with bigger margins than we've previously seen before. But what you have is when you have two of his fellow contendees, if you like, colluding against him and saying, let's create this kind of pact to get rid of him, people don't like that. It's wrong. And as he said himself, if you colluded that way in business or a stock market, you get done for it. But yet people in politics are trying to do that, and people will rebel against that.
Do you think, Emma, this type of politics, given what we've just been speaking about, do you think this type of politics, pointing the finger and saying to people, I'm better than you, I'm wealthier than you, I'm stronger than you, do you think that's a dangerous precedent?
Of course it's dangerous, and it is very worrying. And our enemies, the West's enemies, will use, if he was to become president, will use this against us to say, look what your system threw up and provided. But let's not forget, Ronald Reagan, he was an actor. The press here thought he was a complete fool. You know, we've had this before. We've looked across the pond and we've seen what's going on. And I think and we've not liked it. And the Americans themselves, I was recently in America. I was in Oklahoma City at the anniversary of the bombing there, and I was with people just after Super Tuesday who'd voted for Trump. I was having dinner with them, and actually, you can't be patronising. It's their view. It's what they want. They aspire.
What are you both frightened about?
Sorry. Just
what
let
are
me.
you frightened about?
Can I finish this point?
Well, I hope it's a good one.
It will be.
I'll be the judge of that.
Thank you. The issue is he's got no experience for me, right? Electing people who have had absolutely zero... He's not even been, like Bush Jr., a governor.
Right, I'm sorry to embarrass you. Neither was Boris Johnson, right? And he's the best mayor
Hold on,
London
right,
has had.
Tony Blair, he barely had any experience.
Boris has been a tremendous mayor for London. You don't need to have experience.
You don't need it.
I think it's an advantage
I think it's.
not having it.
I wish more businessmen and women would come into politics rather than just be bag carriers and things. I think it's fantastic news. But I
What
still
about
don't.
Barack Obama?
So on the basis...
Well, he was a lawyer. Go on.
You don't think it's a frightening prospect, the fact that he's... Anything
I don't know
that he says...
Graham, what frightens you? Or
Okay, tell
do
you
you
the
want
worst
Thierry
thing.
Henry to be president? That's what I couldn't quite understand.
Well, at least he might have more of a fact-based argument.
But genuinely, you're a smart bloke. What frightens you?
The fact that he is... Everything that he says, for me, is without account. Because by the time you've analysed what he said, he's moved on to the next offensive or inaccurate thing. And whilst I understand he will tone his agenda down the closer he gets, and it might be a big game for him to get headlines, but it's just the fact that he doesn't live in a reality, and that people, as Michelle says, seem to support him in droves because he's oversimplified I think he's oversimplified the role and the arguments. Rachel,
I think even though the money says that Hillary's still got 75% chance of winning and Trump has got only 25%, everybody keeps counting Trump out, and he's keeps getting bigger.
Yeah.
And as he says, he's the heir presumptive, and also as well as the heir presumptive, the Frake Tan presumptive. I mean, what was going on there? The thing is with Trump is that things he says, like we should put a temporary ban on Muslims,
it's ridiculous.
which everybody discounts and says that's crazy, that's not America. There were exit polls in the last 5 primaries. Republicans who'd voted were coming out. The approval rating of the ban on Muslims was running above 65% in all 5 states. So what happens is he says something that sounds crazy, fiery, as against Hopi Sherry, and everyone says that's ridiculous, but it soon becomes the Republican orthodoxy.
And it becomes the new reality.
And he's soon becoming the Republican orthodoxy.
What I love is he wants to ban immigrants. He wouldn't have had 2 of his 3 wives if he bans immigrants.
But do you genuinely feel comfortable or OK with the fact that somebody with that little regard is doing so well?
Yeah, I don't know. I pick up entirely what Michelle said. I think you said it was a middle finger vote or something like that. It is why we have seen. It is why Jeremy Corbyn achieved what he did for the Labour Party, because he wasn't the traditional politician. It's why Nigel Farage, or is it Farage? I'm not quite sure. David Cameron told me how to pronounce that. But it's why these people. It's why Boris Johnson. It's why Alex Salmond. They are of the people. Traditional politicians. People are bored with traditional politicians.
But does that lead to extremism then? In terms of political extremism, so Le Pen in France,
yes,
you get a backlash because the pendulum will swing so far the other way as a protest vote that you actually end up with unintended consequences.
But I like what Rachel said, so we want to note this down because this is a first. Yeah. But I think we probably are. We probably are in a crazy theory world. We probably are. So that whoever gives the best crazy theory will probably get. But you don't surely want Hillary. I mean, you talk about Donald Trump not of the real world. Hillary Clinton is.
But I just feel that there's a better team behind her. And she'll be more controllable than Trump.
Forget the team.
Well,
Hillary doesn't need a team. Hillary is Hillary. Hillary has got the experience. She knows how it works. She has not only been in the very rare position of being the wife of the president, she's held the role herself. She's gone in, essentially, as Obama's number 2. And she did, for all intents and purposes, a good job. You can't deny that.
Oh, tell me what a good job she did.
Hang on a minute, Nick.
Tell me about her career highs.
Let me just ask you a question. And I'm sorry to accuse you of this maybe so early in our time on this show. What did you make of when Donald Trump said, quite recently, earlier this week, that, she's only got this far because she's a woman?
Playing the woman card.
That was a low blow. He shouldn't have said that.
Shouldn't have said it?
Shouldn't have said it.
But he probably believes it.
Her answer to that was...
You have to ask him that, but you
her
shouldn't have said it.
Her answer to that was... Deal me in.
Yeah.
I am going to play the woman card. I'm proud of it, and I'm going to probably nominate a female running mate, and I'm going to beat you, Donald.
But back to Trump. Does he scare you in the sense that the prejudice that he and the stereotyping that surely?
Of course.
Surely
of course, it's concerning. However, We also know what goes on in American politics, as we've seen with Barack Obama, is if the Senate don't like you, they stop you from having any power. You know, there are balances and systems and checks, and if a Hollywood actor can take the White House, so can Donald Trump. But there will be people to control the Donald or the Trump or the Orange Meister or whatever you want to call it.
Otherwise, we're getting Saddam Hussein, but he's got nuclear weapons this time.
Right, just before you take the chair, Rachel, what was Trump's policy on immigration again? Seems to have slipped my mind.
If I'm president, we're going to build a wall. We're going to build a wall. And that wall's going to be a real wall. We're going to build a wall. We're going to build a wall. It's going to be a real wall. I talk about trade. I talk about China. I talk about the border. I went to a great school. I did well. Smart guy. When I say we're going to build a wall, they all say, you can't build a wall. I said, of course you can build a symbol. We're going to build a wall. Well, everyone said, no, you can't build a wall. I said, well, give me some prefab plank. Bing. We're going to build a wall. We're going to build a wall. And that wall's going to be a real wall. We're going to build a wall. We're going to build a wall. And that wall's going to be why. We're going to build a wall. We're going to build a wall. We need to build a wall. We're going to build a wall. We love you all. It's like a love fest. Bing, bing, bing. We're going to build a wall. Bing, bing. This is a serious wall. Nobody's going to eat Oreos anymore. I'm sure as hell not going to. There's love in these rooms. It's like love. It's like a love fest.
Well, you can watch that time and time again on our social media
I have a
pages.
question. Have you heard Thierry Henry sing? This is what
But I can also say Donald Trump's going to buy that from Sky, and he is going to use that. He's going to love it.
I thought that was really catchy, and I'm feeling the love in this room too.
Yeah. Oh,
Despite how many times does Donald Trump's hair and face change colour?
It does.
Anyway, we must move on. It's been a very bad year for celebrity deaths. The in memoriam segments of the awards shows are going to be very long this year. Prince, Bowie, Victoria Wood, Terry Wogan, George Martin, very sad. And it's still only April. But every other day now, it seems I'm required to indulge in national mourning for someone I don't know and I haven't even heard of. Sir Tom Jones's wife died. So did David Guest and some US soul singer who wrote Me and Mrs. Jones. Don't ask me his name. Did these people really justify making the national news bulletins and filling our Twitter timelines with mawkish personal tributes? We will lose the distinction between public and private grief, between real and fake emotion, if we make such a meal over the passing of each and every celebrity. The death of Sir Ronnie Corbett, aged 85, despite what one of his friends said on the wireless, is not a tragedy. Look, the icons of popular culture are popping off. Many more are in the final departure lounge. Please, let's at least try to maintain our stiff upper lip about the deaths of people we don't know, else we're in danger of turning into a nation of grief junkies.
A couple of things. One, I think we need less stiff upper lip. I think we need to grieve more and be in tune with our emotional side. Particularly because I see so many black armbands at football matches that there's regular minute silence, minutes applause, and I will probably change my mind after I've had my minute silence.
So you want to have your black armband day?
Me from weeks. No, on a serious note, I think it's a personal choice. I do hate the fact that on my Twitter page, for instance, when somebody has died of high profile, that you have that argument with yourself about, should I feel obliged to say R.I.P.? And
no,
I've made a conscious decision not to, never do it, unless, when Johan Cruyff died recently, he directly influenced me as a football player.
Sure.
So I didn't say R.I.P. and,
What did you do?
I just related to something that he did on a football pitch that I remember from my childhood, and it changed the way I saw and played football. So that was a...
So we've got him to blame, then,
exactly,
for your performances for England.
Yeah. So he had that famous Cruyff turn named after him. I was trying to get a tackle named after me.
I do feel... That's fine, I think, to do something... But often you see celebrities tweeting like Ricky Gervais or Eddie Izzard, in which you seem to think that the tweet is more about them and about trying to demonstrate some personal connection with the deceased than it is about the dear departed.
Why are you such a heartless mayor over this?
Mayor, as in M-A-R-E.
Wow.
Yeah,
Nick.
Why?
Mayor. I've been called sister of the mayor, but never mayor before.
How does it affect your life if people
I
want
think
to...
it's boring.
I think,
OK, this is what I... Listen, we should save our tears and put our hankies away until there's something really bad happens. Part of me thinks this is because nothing's really bad happens in too many people's lives. They've got living parents, they've had a peace in our time, and actually Prince dying is the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
The sea change was when Diana died, and we suddenly had conspicuous mourning in this country, which we'd never seen before. And when her funeral, when the cortege was driven up to Northampton, people throwing roses on the car, grown men sobbing in the park, none of whom would have ever met Diana in their lives. And there was a massive sea change. We went from the days of Zulu, you know, standing up there and holding the fort against whatever else it might be.
And it was overcooked,
with
wasn't
the British
it?
Just crying like children.
And it was overcooked.
Ridiculously overcooked.
Exactly.
But
So
really,
you
was it
agree
not
with me,
needed?
Nick?
Was it not a sense that... Was this outpouring not just because people
I was
felt...
sad, but I didn't need to
I got
suddenly
up at 3 in the morning to watch... I was a real hearse-jumper for that occasion, actually, and I watched the whole thing because I was in DC, and so
I see,
very,
that's right,
very
okay.
early. People watched it all over the world.
But now you go... If you drive through to the country...
They didn't know her. I think that we shouldn't have done that.
How often do you see flowers tied to a tree, where obviously there's been some horrific tragedy and a car's gone off or something like that? Or you see bicycles now, white bicycles, where cyclists have tragically died.
I think
it's
that's
so
important because it
conspicuous.
shows where that bicyclist died. Actually, I'm on side for that.
Sorry, can I just say, you know, first of all, a new trend at the same time. First of all, you should remember, most people don't use Twitter. It's a media thing. If you look at their user numbers, they're falling. I just want to put that out there.
It's an old person's media thing as well.
Oh, thanks.
Most people...
Everyone else is on WhatsApp.
OK. Yeah. But a new phenomenon that has come with public grief on social media has become people like yourself, Rachel, I'm also a journalist, policing people's grief. You get a whole column out of it, you get some nice airtime, not you.
But we don't like sob signallers, people who use the internet to show what a lovely person they are.
But I think what I was going to say is nearly 2/3 of British people in this country, they don't have a will, right? That we are living like we don't have death ahead of us. No, hear me out. Can I finish?
Yes, go on.
Right? We can get to the age of 40 now without going to a funeral, right? Death isn't real to us for a long time in our lives. And in a weird way, people feel very connected to these celebrities. And it's kind of like, I don't know, this public grief has, in some way, I'm not saying I'm sort of against it, but it's become the way people can express themselves around death.
This is what I said. Somebody tweeted, I'm sorry to keep going about it, that they didn't know how they were going to get through the day after Prince died.
My friend said something very similar, said today is one of the worst days, she doesn't know how she's going to get through it, and I just looked at that and just thought, that's just weird, shut up. And I do find that just an odd thing. But what I would say is a few things. So there's this whole blaring of private and public, and the whole social media thing has just made us put our lives and our thoughts out there in a way that we never used to do. So I think people don't even stop and think sometimes. And the second thing I would say is I remember when Michael Jackson died, and I might have sent a tweet or something, but I didn't sit there and go, oh my, you know, what a sad day. But I love music. Music for me is such an important part of my life. I associate it with so many different things. And when he died, I went over to Trafalgar Square on my own, and it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. There was hundreds, if not thousands of people. We all were singing and dancing. I had a right good time.
And that's exactly it. Part of the grieving process is celebrating. And with all of these celebrities, they've got a body of work that we also want to celebrate. So part of the outpouring of grief is actually saying, do you know what, let's spend a moment dealing with that. I hate the fact that people will judge somebody for not sending a message on Facebook or whatever it is.
Look at our grandparents. Both my grandfathers fought in the war. One of them pulled out dead bodies from a burning aircraft, and another one swam after survivors from when his battleship was torpedoed. Neither of them ever went on about it, spoke about the grief and trauma they suffered.
It was a different time.
Yes, of course it was. We emote needlessly and far too much about the deaths of people we don't know. And we should just pipe down.
What harm is it doing, though? That's what I just want to understand. Because genuinely...
it's soggy, it's soft, and I think we should really bare our emotions, cry real tears for things that really matter.
But how do you know that that's negating that? You have enough room in your life, enough emotion to be able to say, I feel really sad about Prince dying.
I feel really sad about Hillsborough. I feel sad. Those are legitimate tears. Those 96 deaths were a tragedy. Yeah, the death of an old entertainer is not a tragedy. I would just like us to keep that distinction
front of mind. But isn't it just a bandwagon, Rachel? Isn't it just people want to... Because I think that what people have is like this fear of missing out, and I think there's this bandwagon that we all feel a need often to jump onto, so to be relevant. So you'll see these celebrities, they're trying to be relevant, they want their tweets read out on things, they want to get on that bandwagon. It's not because they're sitting and crying because they're so sad and can't control their emotions, it's because they want that,
But it doesn't mean there aren't genuine people that feel genuine grief, though, with those situations. I had a tear in my eye when my cat died.
Right.
You know. Don't get me started on when my dog died.
Who died and made you the grief police? That's what I want to know.
Happy to be the grief police.
There will be tears up and down the nation because we have to vanish briefly. But let the cheers ring out because we are coming back, and it's me next, and I'll be making my case for the rape laws to change.
Fairness, provocative, straight talking. Fairness, provocative, straight talking. Fairness, provocative, straight talking.
Here's a question for you. How can a supposed rapist ever be a victim? The answer is, in truth, chillingly easily, when his good name, career, life prospects and entire family background dragged through the courts after being accused. This has been brought into the limelight in the case of the 4 Royal Agricultural University students accused, and now cleared, of rape. The case against them spectacularly collapsed on the day the trial was due to open. 2 years after they were charged. Yes, 2 years of being labelled a rapist. 2 years knowing that if convicted, they faced jail terms of more than 10 years. This is what one of the accused, James Martin, said. It's always been there. It's never gone away. I can breathe a bit now. It's taken its toll at college. I've failed exams. I look at people differently now, a bit paranoid. It's harder to trust anyone. Genuine rapists need to be jailed, and for a long, long time. Genuine victims need careful support and help. But surely it's wrong that these 4 men have had their lives ruined while their accuser remains anonymous.
Nick, you say rape law must change. I just want to clarify something. Are you saying now we need to know who the accuser is from the beginning? No. What are you actually saying, just before I respond?
I'm saying that in cases where it can be seen that, and I'm going to use a woman because I know that men can be the victims, but just for the purpose of this debate, where it can be shown that a woman is effectively a vexatious litigant, where it can be shown that she has taken part happily in a sex act with a number of men or a single man, where she then wakes up and she realises she's then got to explain it all to her boyfriend, and she suddenly cries rape, where that can be proven, and in some instances we have women who have a track record of this, we then not automatically, but it then should go back to the courts, and there, at the very, very least, you could possibly look at wasting police time, or attempting to pervert the course of justice, which brings a life term.
Now, let me just say something. First of all, that's happening. 109 women prosecuted in the last 5-6 years or so. Again, not just with wasting police time, with the perversion of the course of justice, a very serious thing that carries a high penalty in terms of prison time. Some people say we were too harsh with those women in this country, but whatever you want to send a message, maybe it does send a message. But what you're talking about there, I find the language very interesting, is where you say where it can be proven, OK? This is an unpopular thing to say in the face of a formidable introduction like that, Nick, where you have, very rightly, and I have full sympathy for those men, for these years of their lives that they have been robbed. I really, really do. Okay. I also know that some of the men's parents have had to remortgage their houses to pay for the legal fees for a case that didn't happen. However, it does not necessarily mean, and I'm not saying on this case specifically because we don't have the specifics, we should say, that a case that collapses, something didn't happen that was wrong. What you can't say for sure is that the accuser didn't have something happen to her that wasn't consensual.
We've got to be careful there.
We do.
Yeah, because remember these men were cleared.
I do. No, I'm not saying these men.
I'm sorry, other cases.
But I'm saying, in the broader sense, just because a rape case collapses doesn't mean a rape didn't happen. I'm not saying these men. And what I'm saying to you is, I think most people would support, and I've certainly had my position changed on this, a changing of the laws where men, and it is mainly men who are accused of rape, were able to remain anonymous until found guilty. And the reason why many people have changed their position is because of one thing.
Go on.
The internet.
Right.
When Margaret Thatcher reversed the policy and made it that you had to be known, you weren't anonymous when you were accused, she made that change because there was an idea that the majority of rapists were serial rapists. The police needed to be able to name the accused so that they could get victims to come forward. We saw that with Jimmy Savile. But if Margaret Thatcher had been...
Stuart Hall, he got an extra term because somebody came forward.
What's it called? The fly paper, when you put the name out there and then the more flies get attracted to stick on the fly paper.
But just to finish this point, but what wasn't there, and if we'd had Thatcher in power for the last 3 decades, I mean, what an interesting time that would have been. But if she had been here now, or her governing ministers were, the internet has changed the game.
Right.
Because their reputation is in tatters,
yes.
these boys, regardless of what has happened.
They've been absolved.
I do think what is very, very difficult and what people want to see change for is around if you can stay anonymous and also how long the amount of time it can hang over you should be shortened.
OK. I saw you, Michelle, kind of nodding as I was outlining my case. I sense I'm going to get more sympathy from you than perhaps I am from Emma on this.
See, this has been quite an interesting one because whilst you was presenting the case, I was thinking about how I feel. And I read a case about this young boy earlier this year, and he'd been accused of rape, and it was a false allegation, and he killed himself because he couldn't deal with the shame of people still at school, at college, having a go at him. Anytime he went on social media, he was regarded as the rapist. And my heart went out, obviously, to him, but also to his family. And I thought, how can that be that I know who this kid is because he's been accused of something that he didn't do? So then I started thinking through the whole anonymity, and I started thinking, well, it surely can't be right at the point of accusation that I know who this person is. And I started leaning with that trail of thought. But then I thought, well, hang on a second. If I didn't know who he was, so let's just say he's kept secret as well, and this whole case is dealt with in secret. So the whole thing is secret. This person makes this claim about this guy. No one knows who this guy is. There might not be enough evidence. And I think Scotland has a third verdict that they can apply to such cases where it's not proven.
Yeah, case not proven.
Yeah, we don't have that verdict available to us. But if that's the case, maybe if this person's identity was known, then someone else might come up and say, well, actually, he did this to me. And then that could be the tipping point that created a case where previously there was none. So I'm arguing with myself because I absolutely agree with you that if someone accuses you of something that you haven't done, your name shouldn't be smeared. Then I go to the other side and I say, well, hang on a minute, then should the false accuser's name be out in the public? Because if you're someone that knowingly tells lies, you should be identified.
Yeah.
But go on.
Sorry, the other thing that's happened since the repeal of the Sexual Offences Act, where both sides weren't automatically entitled to anonymity, it's not just the internet. It's celebrity culture. And I'm in favour of your idea, we restore anonymity. Because what we've also seen is famous people being subject to unfounded allegations, having their names dragged through the mud. In some cases, they have died not knowing that they were not guilty of what they were smeared with in their lifetimes. And we all know who I'm talking about, which is one of them, Leon Britton.
Yes.
Who the police had to go and apologise to Lady Britton to say, we're very sorry that, your name was out there. And then look at what happened with Edward Heath. Police went and solicited more people to come forward outside his house. This is not fair.
And
when I see those boys, I see my 2 children, aged 20 and 22, my own sons, and I think if that had happened to them,
but on
their
your point,
lives ruined forever.
The accusation of somebody is far greater than the apology is as well. Yeah. And I think there's such a disproportion between we're quick to accuse, to say somebody is guilty of this publicly, and then we're very slow and disproportionate in the way we say, do you know what, we got that wrong.
But
I think that...
It's like a newspaper apology,
even a
it's always
front-page
tiny.
apology wouldn't make up for these lads' lives.
No, but it's part of
media on earth.
No, but it's part of them restoring their, who they are and their integrity. And I think it's very hard. I mean, I would agree. In a utopian world, we'd have anonymity, but that I don't know how realistic that is for some of the points that Emma's made around, internet and the fact that people will go very early. And also, what we have to do, we have to be very careful about continuing, in my belief, to encourage people to report.
Yeah, and that's exactly...
And we mustn't at any cost deter people from reporting, because ultimately if you are a victim and a genuine victim, you need all the support you can get, because it must be the hardest thing to bring...
In a way, anonymity might help that, though, because they're saying, I'm not naming this person, but I do want to report the offence. Do you see what I mean?
But can we just put this into perspective? These cases, you know, they're huge for the right reason in the media. It's an awful story which makes, perversely, a great story, which is why the apology is always small. It's not interesting to the audience. We all know how the media works. But according to Rape Crisis, 85,000 women are raped a year. 12,000 men are raped a year in England and Wales. That's 11 rapes every hour. So while we're on air, 11 rapes have apparently happened. This is the exception. This sort of case.
85,000.
85,000.
But only 6,000 are prosecuted a year.
Yes, you come forward and then, you know, 60% conviction rate. I think it's useful to have some figures here, because what Graham's mentioning there is, in all of this, we are not talking about real victims, right?
Well, we are in the case of those 4 lads.
No, but in the sense of... I watched a programme the other night that did some of the interviews with Jimmy Savile's victims. They were all over the country. OK, he's an extreme case as well. But they didn't come forward because they didn't think they would be believed.
Right.
And it is about creating an environment where people are believed on both sides. But what happens with these cases, because there have been so many high-profile cases amongst the many thousands that are real... that have not turned out to be true, just let me finish, that have not turned out to be true, is we end up having media debates that always are thinking about the people who are accused, and we are starting to forget the real victims. I really think we are.
Those 4 guys are the victims, Emma. Why don't you get that?
I am not saying they're not. I think they are in this case. But I can't say
you can have a balance.
I think we need to have a balance on it, and they are the exception, not the rule, in these sorts of court cases. The CPS has made leaps and bounds in this area, but it's easier for the media to focus on the inverted story because it's always more interesting.
I've got a feeling that this one could rumble on all day. So I think let's leave it there and continue in the break. It's my turn next, and I'll be talking about why our approach to success is all wrong.
Provocative, straight talking, fearless, provocative, straight talking.
I'm going to take a moment to talk dirty to you. Are you ready? Steady on, Nick.
Talk dirty to me. Talk dirty to me.
Desire, ambition, success, wealth, achievement. That's hardcore, right? Well, actually, before you write me off as being completely bonkers, I'd put it to you that there are a great number of people here in the UK who would see some or all of those words as dirty. Across the pond, we have the American dream, where people really do believe they can achieve anything. It's not embarrassing to read self-help books or admit to having dreams and ambitions. And if you do try but fail, that doesn't matter, because at least you tried. But here in the UK, I think we're just too quick to pull others down. Success often creates envy and hatred rather than inspires. I'm a big believer that we should aim to be the best we can be, whatever that means to us. And I'd like to see us become a nation which celebrates and encourages success, and where we learn rather than laugh when things go wrong.
Michelle, I'd love to come across as a good person, but I'm afraid my cloven hoof pops out sometimes. And I want to tell a couple of things that occurred to me as you were talking dirty, but not really. Which is, I went to President Obama's town hall debate last Sunday, and there was a moment where someone said, "Sir, you know, tell us what you're most proud of." And he actually answered, and I mean, in an English situation, he said, "Well, you know, I'm pretty proud of the fact that I personally avoided the world slipping into another Great Depression." And I was thinking, that's quite big. That's quite big of you. Well done. Well done, you. But, I mean, no British politician would ever self-aggrandise like that, because we live in a sort of...
Can't think of one.
we live in a culture, luckily, where we have a tabloid press, or a press where they build you up, they knock them down, and we have tall poppy syndrome. And if we see somebody slightly overreaching themselves, they are cut off at the knees. Now, I'm not saying that's brilliant. I agree that we should all try and be the best, and as we're on Sky, believe in better. But I think that we have a real radar for when we think somebody is undeservedly successful. and then we like to take them down. But I think, yep.
The fact is that we get that treatment anyway. You don't have to be sort of overstepping your mark or being a bit too arrogant or believing your own publicity. There's a culture in this country, as Michelle says, of just people succeeding and then the envy being the catalyst for then dragging people back down. And I just feel that it's... When I was at school, there was a culture at school of if you did a little bit too well in an exam, you got hammered by the other school kids, your mates, or you thought you were mates. So it was almost like you didn't want to celebrate your achievements. And I think that's really damaging for us as a society, because we've got to be prepared to try things, to stand out, to create a culture of achievement.
I agree.
Rather than create a culture where you're a bit ashamed, a bit embarrassed that you might get the wrong reaction if you happen to do quite well at something.
I know, I still think it works as a society. We don't thrust our success down people's throats.
I rather like the fact that they're understated. I think that's rather... I rather like the fact that if David Cameron's asked what his greatest achievement, he'd probably say his children or something like that, or his marriage or whatever. I think that's tremendous. I think I quite like the British way, in that when we do things well, which perhaps not as often as we'd like, we can promote them, but otherwise we're quite an understated race. What's the problem with that?
You're not allowed to retweet praise, remember. You're only allowed to retweet abuse. That's the norm.
Honestly, I think so. In America, for example, business, entrepreneurialism, it's something that is almost put onto children to aspire to, that you could, not to force them, but to make them realise that you can achieve anything that you want to do. And Emma, I'd be interested, because I know you've worked in the States as well, and for me personally, I've seen it in the work that I've done. I just think that there's this mindset difference where people are celebrated, supported, pushed, encouraged, and here I just don't think we have it.
I mean, I think there's a better sense of humour in this country. That's what I wouldn't ever get rid of. I think what we need to analyse, and it's very hard to analyse, is a lack of that attitude, which I also saw in America. I used to be a technology reporter. I was in Silicon Valley, you know, interviewing the people running sort of Twitter and Facebook and Google and whatever else was coming out. And, you know, failure there is a badge of honour. You know, if you fail, you don't get hauled over some sort of tabloid press, like, look at this, look at that.
Knocking the tabloid press? It's not the tabloid press's fault.
All right. I'm just saying it's a mirror of society a lot of the time. You're talking about the fact that we do have that culture. It's part of our culture. I'm not knocking the tabloid press completely, but that is part of what it does.
It shows you've tried.
But yes, so I do think we could inject some of that. And I would be interested also, though, around this table to ask, I think one of the problems that is also there is ambition. So not just success. What you're actually talking about is personal ambitions. Yeah. And if you are an ambitious woman, that is said as a criticism. And if you're an ambitious man, it's said as praise.
Nonsense.
That is utter... Go on, Greg. Just...
No, that is
I wonder why.
You've just contradicted yourself, though, because you're saying there's a cultural difference between us and the States.
I think it goes across, but I think it's worse for ambitious women.
Do you get your ideas from...
Well, it's an extension of the same problem.
No,
it's an extension.
Aren't that good.
It's an extension of the same problem. So you're drilling down into a separate issue to promote a subject you're obviously very passionate about, but the essence of what Michelle's saying applies to everybody, I think, within this country, and we pigeonhole people.
Don't be so politically
you made
correct.
but you made a great point, I think, about the about the fact that failure is seen as something that you can never recover from in here, and you know it's important for anybody to sort of try things and not be afraid to fail, and we don't have that. The response to failure in this country creates, I think, a very negative environment.
Don't let her off the hook about men and women. Get into her on that. That's much more fun. It's absolutely
you take over. You take
no. Tell me where women have been held back. Give me a specific example.
I wasn't saying that.
Well,
what I was saying is, when a woman... OK, Jenny, I'm going to ask some women just for a moment.
Yeah, okay,
if a woman is described as ambitious, Rachel, your hands on your hip, you're ready, both hands, do you think it's a compliment in this country?
Yes, it is. It's a compliment.
Do you actually think
anywhere.
it's perceived as a compliment?
You're not answering how she wants
you know, she's like a barrister now. She's going to keep going until... Just answer.
If it's not, it definitely
You could disagree with me, but I think on Twitter right now,
I think
at Emma Barnett, wherever you are,
I
will agree with me on that.
I would be devastated if I have a daughter of 22 who's not ambitious. All women should be ambitious. I think we should also... we should also talk about celebrating failure as much as success. We've got the Eddie the Eagle film out. We love heroic failure in this country. And I regard it as a badge of honour. Every time I've been fired, as somebody said, you know, opportunities for disasters and fresh opportunities for disasters.
Well, that's going to make it easy for Sky News because they were trying to work out how to do it.
Get rid of me after
you've
this
just
show.
given them the script. That's fine. Yeah. Come on, then, keep it going.
There are no disasters, only opportunities, and opportunities for fresh disasters.
You are a very successful, ambitious, blonde, ambitious woman, right? I'm saying the blonde ambition in your family. I always love that. Anyway, the thing is,
Emma.
The thing is, mine's
Ask
died. Michelle,
Yeah.
I'm going to ruin it.
Do you reckon? No, I don't mind if you. I know that I've got a lot of women who agree with me. I did a talk on this last year, and
shame I missed that.
I talked about. I'll send it to you. I talked about when my husband and I speak about our careers to our friends. There is a completely different reaction when I say, "I'm doing this show. I'm doing this radio." Oh, come on, you've got... There you go. No one who's winning says, you've got the wrong friends.
I didn't know it was winning.
But what do they say? Do
about-
they want to bring you down
No, they
because
just
you're
say,
a success?
God, Emma, you're doing a lot.
But I don't. I'm obviously a woman, and I've never. I feel I can have, do, and be anything. And
Why have you raised this then?
But I want to start right at schools. I want better career provisions. I want kids to be taught you can have, do, and be anything that you want. You give them support, and you don't worry when they fail.
Hear, hear.
And well done, because my ambition now is to tell you that that's it for now. More debate and argument coming up next week. Or if you can't wait, send us a tweet.
Well, if you enjoyed that, make sure you tune in for next week's show. It's James Caan's first show, so I'm sure you're going to want to hear what he has to say.
Hi, this is James Caan. I'm really looking forward to my first episode of The Pledge. I just hope, like rehearsals, I'm not sitting next to Greg Dyke again.
Hi, I'm Greg Dyke, and I'm on The Pledge next week. Lots happening. Watch it.